Now that our crew has finally reconvened on the land of giants, we can finally turn our attention towards the group's goals on the island. However, before we can get into anything too high stakes, we decide to dedicate the entirety of this chapter towards a truly heartwarming reunion between two long estranged friends.
But before we can dive into the chapter fully, let's start by taking a look at this week's cover series installment. And as we suspected, Yamato's time of sightseeing in the Udon region can only last for so long, as we're thrusted into true combat in this installment due to Holda making an appearance and immediately taking Tama and threatening her.
We do also see in the background that Speed has pretty much already been knocked out of commission for this fight, but if you take a look around, one character that we don't see in the immediate frame of this cover series is Shinobu, who, being a kunoichi herself, is already very stealthy, but her being missing may be the key to catching Hold'em off guard and rescuing Tama without having to have a giant fight between Hold'em and Yamato.
And it'll be interesting to see what exactly he's even doing in Udon. That's not really his domain. Maybe that's just where he's been relegated to. Maybe he's got something to do with the kidnapping, or he's just another roadblock along the way. We'll see in the next chapter's installment, but for now we can move on to the chapter itself, beginning with the title, which, unlike Adventure in Elbaf, which was very straightforward, this one simply being praise is a lot more open-ended.
Yeah, and kind of whenever you get a general concept title like that, it's very easy to apply it to a number of relationships or situations you see throughout the chapter, but I think it's pretty easy to say the majority of this focus definitely centers around the crew's archeologist, being Robin. And speaking of Robin, we begin on page 1 in the midst of a part of Robin's backstory that we hadn't seen yet in the immediate aftermath of the Buster Call on Ohara. And while even the Marines that were present were absolutely horrified by the screams and the sights of what they saw for the slaughter of the innocents that Sakazuki induced on the escaping civilian vessel, they also do recognize this as a chance to pretty much just blame and demonize Robin even further, saying that she was entirely accountable for the slaughter of her own people.
Yeah, which really messed up, but because of this blame being given to her, we get a glimpse of just the disdain that even common citizens held for this poor little 8-year-old girl, calling her a devil, a killer, having evil in her eyes, just all these terrible things because of what she has been falsely accused of.
Yeah, and one of them's even just like an old grandma, and she's like, yep, she's a killer, this little child, and it's like, man, even the elderly just have no heart for this little girl. And it's just as if Robin's backstory couldn't get more tragic. We get to see on a personal level just how she's treated like a subhuman, not just by civilians, but pretty much every single group, from pirates pursuing her for the high bounty she was issued, to civilians just ostracizing her and wishing that she would just die, just drop dead, to this poor little girl.
Yeah, and it's tough because we then see that she really was thinking about it. We even get the panel of her standing at the edge of a cliff, contemplating dying, and only the words of her mom calling out that she needs to live is enough to stop her.
She does have more in her heart that's keeping her going, and on the next page we see another one of those very important individuals to her resilience, being Saul. And that's a scene that we've seen many times over, with them being Saul reminding Robin that if you endure and you keep looking, you will find a group of friends that will love you and will always give you a reason to keep going. And to always laugh in the midst of the most unbearable pain you can, because there's nothing else you can do, really.
Yeah, and while it is a sweet sentiment and did ultimately get her through all of that pain, it really is just heartbreaking to watch how much she's verbally assaulted and demonized by all of these people, while laughing and crying through it all because of the promises that she made with her friend.
It almost makes it more tragic just to see her forcing a laugh through all of these horrible treatments. But on a less personal and apparent note, in two of the panels on this third page, it does seem that they've kind of given Ohara a similar treatment to what God Valley has in terms of what the world government issues it as, where even on the map, Robin realizes her home has seemingly been erased. They want people to know nothing of the existence, and if they do, it's just the fact that it was a horrible group of people that was annihilated for what they did, which just makes it so much worse and makes her feel so much more alone, I can only imagine.
Yeah, it also just doubles down on how horrible it is that she's being demonized while her people are too. You know, they're making them seem awful, but then also she's an evil beast for having killed them.
Yeah, and luckily we do get to leave behind this very tragic-filled story of this poor lonely girl when we jump forward on the next page to the present, where we see the great Eric has finally reached the dock at the Western Village port, and they're preparing to embark onto the land and finally see their village up close.
Yeah, and they also confirm for us the suspicion that they are sailing on a sea of clouds, as they relayed that they're exactly that, sea clouds, the same kind that the Straw Hats sailed on while traveling the White Sea outside of Skypiea.
And just as a very brief reminder, sky clouds and sea clouds are nearly the same thing. It's the release of pyroglobin when it mixes with water vapor. It really just depends on how dense the water vapor is, whether or not it's an island cloud that you can stand on like land, or whether it's a sea cloud like they see here that you can just row through like the ocean. And another interesting note at the end of this page is that Bragi almost immediately senses that he's like, oh, the others are here as well, but if my memory serves me correct, they saw the other people at the end of the chapter while on the Rainbow Bridge, so I don't know why he pointed it out again.
I don't know, man. Maybe he saw some of them, not all of them, or just wasn't paying attention in that moment. Who really knows?
Sometimes you just gotta fill the chapter out, too, and that might just be what Oda was doing in that corner, but regardless, we do see also from the other perspective on the ground, where we get to see Luffy's group, who, after seeing them sail across the rainbow, now see this gigantic ship just gracefully descending from the sky with clouds coming and forming around their oars on their way down too, which is just one natural phenomenon after another with this ship.
Yeah, all over the place, just a crazy land.
We are given a name though as to how this process even happens, and to my best knowledge, I believe it is pronounced Svalar, which is another Nordic word which roughly translates to cool, which would make sense with them condensing water vapor to an even cooler or more dense state to even support this ship as it descends.
Yeah, and Lilith makes note of how the climate of Elbaf is perfect for this to occur, while also just admiring the wide array of technological accomplishments that the Giants have been able to achieve, some even mirroring some of Vegapunk's own accomplishments back on Egghead.
She doesn't seem to question that this is purely technical, though, although I believe to the Giants this is all just their natural coexistence with this world.
Yeah, it's just become like second nature for them.
They don't even question rainbows anymore.
Yeah, no, it's just what they're for, but, you know, Lilith can recognize and appreciate just how impressive this really is.
And once the ship has landed, we are treated to a brief number of small reunions before we can get to the bigger one later in this chapter. One being Nami noticing immediately and complimenting Robin's haircut. And I think she also says, like, I knew you would get a haircut. Because she was like, I know who's on this island, Robin. We've had girl talk. And then Luffy also reconnecting with his subordinates of the new giant warrior pirates.
Yeah, and it's funny because he, again, tries to tell him, I don't want subordinates, I've told you this. But just like when they first signed on, they're like, guess what, buddy? That's not really your option. We're doing it because we want to follow you.
But to focus more particularly on what Harudin says, he does say all four of us are the new giant warrior pirates, very clearly now excluding Road, who is tied up to a cross in the background and probably just kicked out.
Yeah, final straw.
So with that in mind, he doesn't have 5 subordinate giants, but he's still got 4 good ones. And Harudin even goes as far on the next page to commend his superior on the news of defeating Big Mom, somebody who, even an island, and they use the word insular, which kind of just means ignorant or disinterested in events going on around them. Even this country had such a hatred towards Linlin that they had to confirm and like take part in this global event of her being defeated in the public eye.
Yeah, and even for Gerd, you know, she's like, we were friends at one point, but just what she did to the land of Elbaf was unforgivable. So he's not even like, you know, they all rejoice in having her defeated.
However, even this discussion, it seems a bit too serious or too dark for what they're here for, and they cut that off pretty quickly as they decide it's not the time for chit-chat, it's the time to eat and drink and toast. We have a moose, we have The Straw Hat's here. It's time to celebrate.
Yeah, and this is exactly what Luffy and Usopp especially want to hear. But that's also cut short by Robin reminding everyone, and specifically her captain, what she would like to do first now that they've landed, which is see her long-lost friend, Saul.
And in a very sweet way, actually, for once Luffy's heart is bigger than his stomach, and he decides that, along with the rest of the crew, he wants to accompany Robin for this reunion because he feels like he owes it to this person as well, to meet them in person. And as he says, he wants to give them a genuine thanks for treating his valued crew member with a sense of love and protection.
Yeah, and like you said, that is big for him and just shows that he does have that sincere care. And realizing the importance of this to the Straw Hats, the rest of the Giants are on board too and state that they'll wait for the crew to return before they begin the celebration. So they're willing to let them go and do this first.
It's very interesting that despite their immense size and their love for war, most all the Giants are very humane and they very much understand the importance of their own connection. So for them to just be like, hey, we put together this whole feast, but we're willing to wait for this one person.
Postpone it so that you can go have this, heartfelt moment.
Yeah, no, it's very humanizing of them, and I think that's a very interesting angle to take for the Land of Giants. But moving away from this celebration as the group travels towards where Saul typically resides, Usopp comments on how even the warriors of this land decide to dedicate themselves to learning, something that even Gerd expounds on by saying, yeah, and Saul's a big part in that. He helps teach us history, he covers certain books, which I can almost guarantee you are mostly the text they saved from the Tree of Knowledge for Onohara.
Yeah, it definitely is. Even when they first saved it, it was said that these guys understand the importance of these books. So it makes sense that once they saved them, they would dedicate themselves to learning more about them.
Yeah, if it's worth being destroyed, it's definitely worth knowing what's in these books. And it's then that the group finally arrives at the location known as Warrior Springs and the home of the Owl Library. A very simple in design, but yet very just gorgeous structure with the rounded bottom where all the books are held, and then another kind of like balcony and house on top of it, while this all sits on tree branches besides these waterfalls that are just everywhere on this island.
More insane scenics. Truly is a beautiful island all the way through. But seeing that they've arrived, Luffy tries to just rush right in, waste no time, just getting right to meet Saul and thank him. And perhaps still being a bit overly motivated by the feast that is awaiting him. So while he's willing to go and do this first, he wants to get it out of the way.
Yeah, no, he still wants to get back. He smelled that food. But luckily Nami is there to quickly stop him in his tracks and be like, no, idiot, this is for Robin.
This isn't for you, yeah.
This is Robin's reunion, and you even get a very young girlish moment from Robin where she's like, I can just feel my heart pounding. I'm so excited. It's nice to see somebody that's usually like the cold member of the crew be very soft in this moment.
Yeah, and it makes sense that because it literally is taking her back to the happiest she ever was as a child. But before she can experience that, very suddenly an unknown giant comes running up to the group and informs them that Saul has fallen and can't get up, which sends everyone into a worried frenzy, with Luffy almost seeming angry, like, what, we just came here to see him and he's gonna fall down now? But then Chopper's like, hey, I'm a doctor, I can help him, we'll rush right there. But as they point to Saul's body, Robin doesn't seem that concerned.
No, out of everyone you would think she would be the person most worried. Instead, she just says, oh, how silly. Completely unfazed by it, and as she tells them, she's like, even Chopper, we don't need doctor's attention. You can hang back.
Yeah,
I
go
got
myself. She's got it.
She's clearly at ease and not really getting worked up. And as she walks over, she even begins to smile and laugh as she's like, I know exactly what's going on here.
Yeah, and it does make sense as we get to the next page because you see him lying there, basically exactly how she found him when she was a child, looking as if he had just washed up on shore.
Yeah, the same way that she encountered him as a child. And as she gets closer, he begins to peek his eyes up to see if it's her, before lunging towards her with a loud roar, where even before as a child he couldn't scare her, he's definitely not scaring her now.
Yeah, and next page he tries to be, hey, did I get you? Just staring right back at him silently, this time smiling, but very similar to as a kid, just unfazed, and still can't get her.
And he does laugh and apologize because I think they both kind of understood. They're like, how do you say hello to somebody after what we've been through together, other than the very first way we met in the first place? And he knows that she's not a kid, but he thought it would be a nice way to break the ice, and it seems like that was the perfect way for their reunion to kick off.
I would agree. I mean, I appreciated it. And then she also just laughs that you still have that same ridiculous laugh, you know? He's still got his same Dorishishi laugh, and that takes her back.
It's very sweet, especially considering what we saw earlier in the chapter with what that laugh got her through.
Yeah.
Seeing it again without the negative context has to be just a very freeing feeling for her. And he does give another big, ridiculous laugh, just saying, yep, it's still ridiculous, she. He just picks her up and takes her in his hands, brings her closer to his face, and as he gets a closer look at her, it's very obvious he can see nothing but her mother, Olvia, and even comments that she has the same kind eyes as her mother, which very clearly means a lot to Robin, somebody who only really has a few memories looking her mother directly in the face and seeing those eyes.
Yeah, you could definitely tell that it touched her. And she even flashes back momentarily to some of the final words that she heard Olivia speak. You know, telling her that they can't give up, the future has to live on, and that she'll understand someday why all of this had to happen.
We also do get a title card for Saul as they're sharing this moment, where it does comment on his former vice admiral status, but I think the more important part, especially to this chapter, is Robin's savior.
Definitely is.
Which is interesting because he only knew her for like a day and a half, but he gave her a day and a half of genuine connection and belief in the future, and that meant everything to this kid.
Yeah, I mean, it got her through everything, got her through the worst childhood ever, and also taught her how to laugh. But then he kind of transitioned into, did you hear Vegapunk's broadcast? Which makes sense. It's huge to them that this word got out. And she tells him, I was there. A lot was happening. Couldn't really hear it. But her being the studious type, she did follow the coverage that the news gave it after the fact.
Oh, of course. She's always going to be covering whatever recent events are going on, even if it's not true that they're talking about. But Saul also doubles down on saying that Vegapunk's declaration is history written by the victors, being a mantra that really meant a lot to O'Hara, and the mere fact that he even was able to share it with the world shows that O'Hara's legacy lives on, as he refused to let those people that were destroyed and slaughtered be lost to history. And while he knows that Vegapunk has his flaws and wasn't really one to preach on morality, he does call him a true scientist who, despite his many different reasons and how he got to his accomplishments, in the end he put his life on the line for what was truly important, and that, like Hiraluk said, is everything. How a man dies is, I mean, pretty much just as important as how he lives.
Yeah, and he's right when he says both O'Hara and Vegapunk himself took a huge leap of faith that will very much shape the future of the world and drastically change how things play out.
Robin doesn't seem to want to talk about this kind of matters too much, though.
She's just like, yeah, anyways.
Yeah, she like noddingly agrees, says yeah, but then she reaches to touch Saul's burn and asks if it still hurts, the same spot that Aokiji and everything else had just pretty much frozen him over. But he laughs at the fact that he's much harder to kill than he might have initially thought. And I actually find it really interesting that he recounts that he woke up in the ocean almost as if the ice had melted him towards there. I wonder if Aokiji controlled his ice to actually put him in the ocean out of harm's way.
It's tough to say, because his suggestion that it could have just been the heat from the Buster Call and the inferno that it caused, that kind of does make sense that it could be what happens. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is a little confusing, like how exactly he ended up there. And that he would wake up in time to stop from drowning, too.
Yeah, no, it almost feels very controlled to me, and considering how little we know about Aokiji's motivations, or Kuzan, I guess we have to call him now because he's not a Marine, but whatever. I do think that might be a card in the book of Kuzan might still have a bit more of a heart than he leads on.
Yeah, definitely an interesting character that a lot remains to be seen. But he then shifts his attention to all the lies that he had to read in the newspaper after the fact, when he realized that Robin survived, but they were pinning everything on her.
No, he's real for that. He's like, this has just made me angry. I couldn't do anything about it, and I knew you were out there alone. But Robin doesn't want to focus on any of the dark stuff. They've moved past those darker years, and instead she just asks Saul, aren't you gonna praise me for being alive? Immediately calling on the chapter title, praise being one of the things that Robin really doesn't ask for all that often. She likes compliments.
Yeah, she'll take it, but she's not gonna ask for it ever. And he does immediately. He laughs and tells her, you're right, of course. It was you against the world. You've been through so much. And she did a great job staying alive all those years without him.
I do find it kind of funny, too, that as he pulls her closer, just being proud and broken up in this moment, that, like, it does look like Robin's a little crushed in this giant's body. But I don't think she really minds all that much, as when she's pulled closer, she begins to flash back to the pain she felt over losing everyone, from Clover to her mother, and even in her mind, Saul, for all of those years.
Understandably.
Yeah, she saw him frozen before her very eyes, but
she didn't know he was alive until Vegapunk told her.
Yeah, she only recently had this hope for a reunion even returned. And she was always asking herself why she was the only one to live and wishing that she would die. But it seems as though it's all worth it now as we see her smile break through all of those painful emotions.
Yeah, and it does, understandably overtake her. And she just starts crying and tells him, I've missed you so much, Saul. And he hugs her and just still laughing because it's Saul. It's crying at the same time and tells her, I missed you too. And they're just hugging and crying and really letting out those 22 years of pain that they were separated from one another.
And as this beautiful reunion is going on, we pull back just slightly to see all of the friends that accompanied Robin to this moment. And while Luffy's just smiling and Zoro's standing off stoically because he doesn't like emotions, every other person on the crew is exactly how every fan was reading this chapter, just choked up at how beautiful this truly is and how cathartic it is to see that weight taken off of her shoulders.
Yeah, especially where they had to get her to just declare that she wanted to live, to now finally have that reunion and be brought back to the person who gave her that drive in the first place to make it that far.
It's truly something very special, and I'm really glad we took a whole chapter just dedicated to how special of a moment this was.
Yeah, she deserved it, and it was good seeing the flashback just to really reinforce what she went through.
So, while this chapter may have not been groundbreaking, it was really some beautiful fan service that we've all been waiting years to see, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't get choked up reading this.
Absolutely, yeah. It's pulling at me now just to read it again.
So we'll sadly have to wait a couple more weeks for another chapter, but we do have the promise that in the future will come another great color spread with the next edition, which is just another aspect to look forward to.
An Elbaf color spread's gonna go hard, you know it is.
Oh, absolutely. So until then, make sure to like the video and comment your thought on Robin's reunion with Saul and how it made you feel. Subscribe for more One Piece content as we will have more Elbaf related discussions in the coming weeks to carry us until the next chapter drops. And remember, be crew!